there's going to be the ups and downs, and try not to overreact. And nobody plays great every week, but I think for juniors, most of them want to play D1 golf. They want to maybe play professionally. So stay on the path of getting better, right? So if you get better a little bit each week or each month, we're going to be fine.
This is The Tournament Code.
We appreciate you taking the time to join us today, Rick. We know a little bit about your instruction, seen a little bit about you on Twitter, but before we get to your instruction, everything like that, we'll start a little bit with your playing career, not just your professional playing career. Let's go back to the beginning. Tell us how you got into the game of golf.
Well, my father was a real good player, still playing. He's 90 years old. He introduced me to the game. I started out caddying for him. And then because I had my shot to play when I was about 10 or 11, and I was fortunate to grow up at a member private club here in Seattle, and fell in love. I played a lot of other sports, but fell in love with kind of the individual challenge of golf. And I was fortunate. I kind of experienced some rapid improvement. I picked up the game pretty quick and was off to the races.
Very cool. As far as like getting started, you said you got good fast and improved quickly. Were you taking lessons at that time, or was it just something that naturally happened? And when did you start playing actual tournaments?
Yeah, our head golf professional, Ron Hagen, basically he gave me a couple lessons, showed me how to hold the golf club, and that's back in an era when not so much the club outside the hands, but just toe up to toe up, kind of half swings and things like that, and learned how to hold the club properly and play a lot of golf. And I did start competing just within a year and a half, 2 years, and when I was 12, I won the Seattle City Junior Tournament in my age bracket, and went on from there.
What were some of the other competitions that you played in? I know today it's all about the AJGAs and other tours like that, but what were kind of the junior tournaments that you played in?
Yeah, so being out here in Washington State, we had Washington Junior Golf Association was actually established about the time I got into it. So I was one of the first state junior champions. American Junior Golf Association back then was just starting, believe it or not, and it was kind of more in the Southeast and hadn't made its way around the country. So I never played in an AJGA tournament. So my schedule basically was a summer schedule. It wasn't year-round tournaments. It was summer. So it was we had 4 what they call sub-district tournaments through Washington Junior Golf Association, and then a district championship, and then our state championship. And then try to qualify for the national junior stuff, US Juniors, PGA National Junior, which I happened to win when I was 16. So anyway, so it was compared to the kids I work with now who are playing year round and playing tournaments all year long, it was quite different back then.
I'm sure it's a different competitive landscape now. And, a lot of kids specialize young right now. When did you figure out that this was what you wanted to spend your life doing? Because you ended up going on to BYU and playing a decent bit there and winning a bunch of stuff in your time.
Yeah, I played other sports. When I got to junior high school, I started doing a little bit of bench sitting in basketball. So that was probably, I was a decent athlete, but that wasn't probably my future. And pretty good baseball player, played that up through, I was about 13 years old. And so I, as far as that kind of early specialization thing, I stayed athletic and played other sports. And it was about that age when the success I was having I started fantasizing about doing some big things, playing the game, and was having the kind of success that sort of supported those dreams. So when I was about 13 or so, 14 years old, that's when I, started, like every kid, imagine playing at the Masters and doing all those big things.
Around the time that you won the National Junior PGA Championship, did you view yourself as one of the best juniors in the country, or did that success come as a little bit of a surprise?
No, I think I was very confident, and I was fortunate to have the success to kind of back it up. So there was, it's tough because the track I had, which was kind of just jumping from each level to the next level, no problem, and kind of pretty straight line of improvement. And, I know it's not typical for most, but I kind of wanted every level, every age group, and kind of all the way up to when I got on tour. So easy to sort of have the confidence stepping into the big arenas. So whether it be national junior tournament or even first time playing at the Masters as an amateur, I kind of showed up. I didn't share with anyone, but feeling like I had a chance to win the darn thing. So it's like, I don't know how you manufacture that stuff, but I was pretty confident.
So what were some of the things that you would attribute that, linear progression to throughout your whole career?
Yeah, I would say that at that stage, it happened later, but at that stage, I didn't have the interference of too much information or competing ideas. And the game was real simple for me then. It was about hitting golf shots. And I grew up on a golf course, hilly, trees, slope greens, all sorts of different things. So I think that environment sort of just the challenges it presented, and without a driving range, so I played a lot of golf. I think that variability, adaptability, all those different things, I didn't feel like there was a situation I wasn't going to be ready for. Just learned how to improvise. Obviously, I developed skills to pull that stuff off.
Absolutely. One of the things, we'll jump a little bit ahead, just talking about what you do now. You're an instructor now, and we'll talk more about that. But that ability to adapt and improvise, is that something that you work on with your students? And if so, how do you try to help them get that?
Well, the first and most important thing is getting them out on the golf course. And, it's still a challenge in this game, right? That pandemic and post-pandemic boom hasn't helped. Golf courses are just jammed full with players. So certainly getting on the golf course a lot is something that I preach. And then in practice, a lot of creativity and variability. I know there's those that don't see things the way I do, but sure, we can go out and play one particular shot all day long and tear it up. But I love seeing players try to create different golf shots. And so obviously a flat lie off a mat, which is, in our climate, that's what most people are practicing on. But how are we going to learn that other stuff if we're not on a downhill, side hill lie, and, heavy rough and stuff like that? So, so it's, I guess, get out there, play a lot. I've actually talked people out of purchasing lessons from me and said, hey, if your budget's limited, I'd rather see you spend the money on the kid playing. So, pretty strong believer.
I know out of all the coaches we've talked to, some of them only teach juniors, while some of them, would prefer to teach club members and make money that way. Is there a specific group that you focus on teaching, or does it matter?
I haven't focused on any particular segment. I feel like the toughest ones for me now are beginners. I feel like probably my specialty is taking where somebody's currently at and getting them to the next step. And certainly it's a tough game to learn. And I still do teach beginners, but I think it's harder for me, right? So, but no, I think that I do feel like I could help a player get to the top 10 in the world, right? I understand the game well enough and know enough about performance, but that opportunity hasn't presented itself. But I would say that probably my sweet spot now is the frustrated YouTube, Instagram, serious golfer, and helping them find their way out of the mess they've climbed into.
I want to go into later, about your time on the tour and playing in all the majors. But for now, I want to ask, how do you use your experience of playing on the PGA Tour to help different types of golfers?
I think probably at its core is that mistakes I made, right? Try to save people from going down the path that I went down later in my career. But I feel like I've been curious to understand try to figure out how I did it. Because I could ask that question, like why you were, because I had that success. It's a great question. But just to understand the fact that I played at a high level helps me to understand that there's more to it than, forearm externally rotating and whatever else, right? those things all matter. I'm a swing coach, but there's a lot of different stuff to look at that's won golf tournaments and made a ton of money. So I just feel like having played at the high level with a kind of a bowed left, a wrist inflection at the top, we call it now, but that I thought was a wart and at the time. And then now I realize, well, that's one way to do it. So I just think that knowing that it's a complex organization of a lot of different things that lead to good scoring. And I feel like I understand what those are because I played at a high level.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about, you said things went wrong later in your career and you found yourself down a road that maybe you didn't want to be going down. Before we talk about that, let's talk about early in your career. As far as like college goes, you went to BYU, you were a 2-time All-American there. You played in the Masters and the US Open, I believe, and I think you were low am in both of those. Tell us a little bit about your college to early pro career progression and kind of the way things went for you.
Yeah, so I had the successful junior career and then chose to go to BYU at the time. This is back in the early 1980s. Oh my gosh, time ago. But at that time, BYU was perennially in top 5 ranked teams in the country, right? Pretty much a powerhouse. And I had a great opportunity to compete against great players and both externally and even on my team. And I got off to a really good start, won qualifiers my fall of my freshman year, just kind of blew it up and got out there. And I think my freshman year finished top 10 individually, like 10 or 11 times out of 13 tournaments, and just so kind of got rolling right away. We won the NCAAs my freshman year as a team, and then had success in the summer amateur circuit, won the Western Amateur, medalist, I won the match play, and got, I think, to the semifinals, US Amateur. And so just, again, the track of, having success on the big stage, doing well. And so now I'm projecting forward, right? I put in I stayed for 4 years, got my degree. And then back then, maybe it was a better system, but there was no Corn Ferry Tour. There was no intermediate. Q School was directly to the PGA Tour. And I missed my first year. Played some mini tour events, made some money, got through US Open qualifying, and was in contention on the weekend. And it fell back to 9th place, I believe, and made some money, enough to kind of get rolling, get some temporary status on the PGA Tour. And kind of then 17 years later, I was done. But so anyway, that was kind of again, that straight line. Obviously, there's ups and downs throughout that process. But for the first half of that career, so to speak, I just kind of kept being the golfer I was, and then had my first kind of longer term struggle and kind of made some poor choices. Didn't help.
I'd love you to go into detail about, first of all, qualifying for that first US Open as a young pro, and then being in contention, what that felt like, some of the big names that you were up against, and ultimately, what caused you to kind of fall back a little bit.
Well, your listeners are going to have to fire up Google and start Googling some names, figure out who were these guys I played against. And so the qualifying process, I can't remember exactly where I played locals and sectionals and that sort of thing, but we were playing that year, 1985. It was at Oakland Hills outside of Detroit, and shot 69 day 1 and good start. Got 67 day 2, pretty darn good. That's off to a good start. And so I was in the second to last group, so the penultimate group, I guess you call it. That time, I believe the names that were up there, I think TC Chen from Taiwan was either leading that at that moment, or maybe it was the final round. And then Dave Barr from Canada, Andy North, played with Gary Player. But anyway, I think Fred Couples, maybe even Seattle's own, might have been up there as well. But so anyway, I was in the second to last group, both on Saturday and Sunday. I was a 22-year-old kid that didn't have his tour card yet. Anyway, did drop back to, I think, 9th place or so. Yeah, it was a great experience. And as the US Open typically is, tough conditions. And I'm glad there wasn't another day. My score kept getting a little higher that weekend. But anyway, so that really launched everything. And I had previous experience playing in the US Open as an amateur. And had already, and I had played in a couple of Masters, so that stage wasn't entirely new. So I think I was pretty well prepared to perform that week.
Normally, when we talk with guests, we focus on them, and you said we'd have to Google some of those names you played with. I had a question about in 1986. Obviously, you played in the Masters, and you were T35, and we don't want to focus on what Jack did there, but tell us a little bit about your time there, and that was your first time at the Masters as a pro. Tell us how it was different from, if it was different from when you were playing as an AM, and anything that kind of was unique that week for you.
I played earlier on the day, and I'm not so sure I was on property when the roars of Jack's back nine were happening, but yeah, I wish I had a better story for you about all that. But to me, it wasn't really that different playing as a professional. Played there in 83 and 84 as amateur. My experience there is that's a different type of tension that you might feel than a U.S. Open. I feel like Augusta National, you're kind of on the edge. There's a small difference between balls coming off the green, going in the water, and that sort of thing. Whereas back then, the U.S. Open was hack it out of the rough and bogey yourself to death. So, but anyway, it's a special place to play, but it was a player has a different experience than the patrons. Players, even before my time, the Masters guys lit it up even more because it was actually not long before I played where the greens were Bermuda, slow Bermuda, and played hard and fast. And I don't know if you guys have seen any of those videos. Go back to late 70s or early 80s. The guys are smashing 20-footers. So, but anyway, yeah, that was one of the greatest moments in golf in my lifetime was winning there, 86.
Very cool. So you played in those tournaments, as we talked about. You felt confident, and then you also had a few wins on tour early in your career. So that when you played in the U.S. Open, that was 1985, and then the next year you got your first PGA Tour win. Tell us a little bit about what it felt like to get there and what went on that week for you.
Yeah, interesting. So they just wrapped up the senior event up on the same course at Enjoy Golf Club and Golf Course in Endicott, New York. So it was the BC Open. It's now the Champions Tour plays that same track. The year before, I had played there, and I think it was kind of just a gloomy fall week, cold and foggy, and some rain, and I played poorly, and so I wasn't really looking forward to going back in 86, but I needed to, and so show up and. You just sometimes you play great golf when you're not expecting it. And sure enough, I went out there and got off to a great start and just kind of rolled and had confidence and ended up working my way up into a spot where kind of had held the lead all week and kind of hung on. So obviously up to that point, I finished off tournaments before, obviously it wasn't against PGA Tour players, but I did know what to do and kind of what to trust. And we might get into this, but feels, right? So it's like I know at 18th tee, there's a couple ponds up the left side and thick trees down the right. You got to put it in play. And, at that point, there's a feel I had, kind of the anti-left feel. And anyway, so I had developed those through the years. So it allowed me to play well down the stretch and pull that one off.
Does your strategy change going into a final round when you have the lead compared to maybe if you're chasing the leader?
Not really. I typically play pretty aggressively, meaning, I'm not playing as an idiot out there, but, I think there's a right decision, whether you're tied for the lead or you're three back. It's about executing shots and making putts. But no, I would say that I'm one that would look at the leaderboard. Some people, I guess it doesn't make any sense in the world to me. You wouldn't look to know where you stand in a tournament, but there's great players that supposedly do that. But I didn't feel like I'd kick it into gear, but I like to know where I stood. But my I'm not going to change anything about what type of shots I hit or how I hit them. And I think that I'm pretty intuitive when it comes to, what's the smart shot to play at the time. Now we've got all sorts of stuff to help folks with that, and the course management, analytics, and everything. But I think I pretty much did everything by today's book.
As far as the feels go of a final round, obviously going to be very nervous, have a lot of adrenaline going. What were some of the things that you did to harness that?
Yeah, I think that I'd remind myself that hey, it's not the end of the world, so to speak, right? Having some perspective. Obviously, it's a big deal. That's something that nobody needs to tell us, right? You guys have played competitive golf. Nobody needs to remind you that this shot matters or this round matters. We certainly have. I think we're more well informed now when it comes to mindset, heart rate, brainwave activity, all that different stuff. So today's players are certainly benefiting from sort of all the training we can do now. But I think that I had a balanced life. I had priorities in my life other than just golf, but that's not to say there weren't times when the heart's racing and everything else. And I think that in order to manage that and I still use this in my coaching today for every player. Obviously, the tournament player, it's more applicable, but that you're going to have to execute golf shots when you're scared, when your heart rate is high, and much as we work on that. So I typically try to build from a technical standpoint, somebody's golf swing to the point where, they can be scared to death and the tidal wave of emotion comes rolling through and they can put it in play. So I think I was always pragmatic in that way. And so I was pretty prepared to execute good golf shots, even though I was scared to death.
Executing good golf shots under pressure is tough. And as you said, you did it well there, but you mentioned that later in your career, you felt like you went down the wrong road. Tell us a little bit about what road you feel like you went down and the results of that.
I'll get the years mixed up, but I had a stretch, first extended slump, let's call it, a stretch where missing most, if not all, the cuts, and went on for a longer period of time than I ever experienced before. And I mentioned Ron Hagen was the local pro, showed me how to hold the club, and had a few lessons from him, but I'm many years removed from that at that point. And sure enough, somebody says, well, you need to go see so-and-so, and so I decided to, fly across the country and spend time with a new coach, a new swing coach. And when a player is playing poorly, they're very vulnerable, right? I mean, it's like, we're all ears, and our self-confidence is low. We're not believing in things we did in the past and the whole thing. And so I bought into changing my backswing and changing the wrist position at the top of my swing. And that was a long, arduous process where I worked so hard, and it was a matter of quite a few months working on it. I got, my swing, I was proud of how it looked when I got done, but I had no idea how to hit it. So, you change somebody's club face orientation, and somebody's had success and put in a gazillion hours doing it one way. And even though you can make an argument, hey, well, that position's better, I've got to figure out how to deliver club face at the bottom now from a different position. My career went on for a handful of years after that. Actually, my second win came after that, but I wasn't as good a ball striker as I was when I was 17 years old. So I'm very, very careful about making changes with good players. There's got to be a super strong reason to do so.
When have you had players come to you that were good and needed a change? And you said you're careful with that. How exactly have you approached that with them, and how do you make sure that you're not inserting yourself more into the equation than necessary?
Yeah, that's a good question. I basically start with looking at, okay, what are their stated goals? Usually, I'm pretty comfortable to be around. Somebody will share their dreams. I say, man, I love huge. I had big ones too. And I think, okay, can they achieve those with what they've got? Is there something like, I don't know. I think that's somebody looking at a business, right? It's like, what, if the earnings aren't is it a revenue issue? Is it an expense issue, right? So I think when people look at people's golf games, it's like, hey, do you need 120 miles per hour club speed to achieve goals, or are we good with where we're at? So the speed training part of it is, are we making solid contact? If not, why? Is there something biomechanically that's going on? Is center mass of the club out of whack? And so looking at it very, systematically, and it's like, well, we can find examples, quite frankly, the three of us, of all sorts of orientations and different swings that have struck the ball beautifully. And it's like, yeah, Scotty Scheffler's lead and stroke scheme approach everything, and look at that move, right? And so I just feel like I can't be lazy. Like, I don't just teach the same thing to everybody, right? Everybody's an individual. So we're going to look at their golf game, and then there's sort of the right time of year to do it, potentially. But I would say if I have a fault, I'm a little overly hesitant to make changes, right? There's been a few times where I asked, gosh, we should have had perform surgery early on. But I've learned from that. But, it's like, there's part of it's framing it, having an open discussion with the player. This is what the process might look like. And I think there's times where people just need to shut down tournament golf for a while, and these poor juniors that are in this development stage playing so many darn tournaments, there's never a good time to actually, make changes if needed. So, but that's kind of my approach. I had an awful lot of time to do that, right? I just played summer junior tournaments, and then college, we'd shut it down, right? And I had winter time in Utah and whatever else, catch up on academics and other things in their life. But there's a time and a place. But I think too many folks believe this swing has got to look a certain way, and I feel bad for them because often they don't improve, and they actually can get worse.
Speaking of juniors and, playing an entire summer full of tournaments, how do you debrief with a junior golfer after a tournament? How do you guys, evaluate how they played, how their mental game was, and, maybe where they should have been?
Yeah. So, I don't specialize with juniors, but I'm certainly working with a fair number of them. Currently working with probably more kind of college age, amateurs, and some young juniors. But I want them to learn for themselves. So I'll kind of lead pretty Socratic. Hey, what do you think? Type of thing. And I'd love to watch them play more. I do that. Days off, I'll drive a few hours to watch them play in competition. It's not the best move financially to do that, but we'll have interaction. We'll ask, okay, so what do you think? What do you think the problem is, right? And when they see 2 or 3 doubles follow, getting ticked off, that sort of thing, right? So but some of that too is just, you got to recognize that depending on their age, there's a maturing process, right? That 12-year-old boy should be probably different than a 17-year-old junior golfer, right? So I try not to, I guess a long-term approach, I guess, is what I would say, is that, yeah, it's disappointing, that you shot 77, but what can you learn from it? What needs to get better? And then I feel like there's fluctuations in golf, right? I mean, this age of analytics, everybody all of a sudden is screaming about how great so-and-so is at putting, 7.4 strokes gained putting at the U.S. Open. It's like, yeah, but for the year they're 130th, right? So, I mean, it's just like there's going to be the ups and downs, and try not to overreact. And nobody plays great every week, but I think for juniors, most of them want to play D1 golf. They want to maybe play professionally. So stay on the path of getting better, right? So if you get better a little bit each week or each month, we're going to be fine.
If I'm aspiring to get better, play at a higher level, whatever that might be, whether I'm a junior wanting to play college player wanting to play professionally, or a professional player wanting to play on a higher level tour, tell us about how you structured your relationship with your students, as far as how many lessons maybe you want to take with them, the format of that lesson, the time, all of that. Give us a little bit of insight into how you try to work the relationship so that they can get the most value out of it.
Yeah, so I don't have at this point, sort of the real formal program for that. I probably because I'm more teaching broadly, golfers of all different abilities and everything else. So I haven't really, not effectively a tour coach, whatever that means, or specialize in juniors. So I don't have, the junior academy where kids lined up, 4 at a time and all that. One day I might, but so it's we'll have our sit downs and discuss what works. Some families it's a budgetary thing. How often can I see the kid? And I'm trying to make a living at this craft. But, I would say that we got to make sure that paying attention to all the aspects of the game. And it's hard to be there all the time. And, in this age of specialists, that there's a lot of juniors that might feel like they want to see somebody different or I should say the parents want their kids to see a specialist for certain things. So when that's the case, I try my best. I use the Coach Now app, but to try to pull everyone together so the communication is clear. So that let's say swing coach is suggesting a change before the tournament, and the sports site doesn't know about it. And, whatever you can get people twisted up, but I kind of serve all those roles for most of my clients. I've been trained in most of those disciplines to some depth, and just simply I'm kind of out here, not on an island, so to speak, but Seattle, Washington is not, the center of the golf universe, but I'm just, I feel like it all works together very holistically, and that swing changes affect kind of mindset that affects, obviously if our bodies aren't healthy or not strong or not mobile, it affects us. So it's but I work with back to your question, I would say that competitive players, it's a very, very individual kind of case by case. Some of them don't need much help at all. Quite frankly, I just need to say, hey, you're fine. Go play.
Going back to the scheduling thing that we were talking about, if I was a junior golfer or even, a college level player or a professional golfer, and I came to you and I have all these tournaments lined up, 10, 15 tournaments for the summer, what would you dial me back to? How many tournaments do you think would be ideal to play?
I'd say if you're rocking and rolling and it's like you just lighten it up. We've got a young gal up here, Angela Zhang. I don't work with her, but she's 14 years old. She'll be playing in the U.S. Women's Open. She's winning everything as a junior and as an amateur in this area. It's like, keep going, right? If you're a junior listen, you're not good enough yet. And you're better off playing no tournament, than 10 or 15 lousy. I mean, I don't know. I think some people need reps to play in tournaments, but now you're affecting confidence as well as you're not getting any ranking points, you're whatever. So it'd really be situational, but I would say that when are you going to get better? If that's part of it, and can you do it when you're playing in tournaments? It's sure. You can learn things, you can improve while you're playing golf tournaments. So very individual, but I would say most young players play too many, generally, and that there's this darn, recruiting process, the whole thing, right? It's kind of a two-headed monster, but I feel like if a junior is improving and they don't play that many tournaments, a coach is going to notice. And whether you play at Stanford or Georgia or Belmont or whatever, right? That it's about continuing to improve and play good golf. And I just feel like sometimes the cart gets before the horse a little bit. Families are spending all the money flying around the country to play junior tournaments and playing poorly. And I just feel like, developing as a player is way more important during that phase than acting like a tour player playing tournaments all year.
And what would you say the most important things to do in order to develop yourself as a player are?
Well, I think that I want players to be able to think internally as to what's going on rather than now to ask a coach. as far as, what do I need to work on, or, that sort of thing. I'm certainly, I know more than most of them, but I think that I'm all about developing the individual and sort of working my way out of the job. And so being aware of, hey, do I have the shots around it? I mean, even, you can use an app to tell you where you stand, as far as, how you're performing. But I think just look around. Is there some other kid that's, a better putter than you, or is there somebody else that, hits approach shots better or wedge shots or whatever? But I think maybe helping the player to understand what the standards are, where they're trying to head. But, again, back to one of my first comments when we got started here is, just gotta play a lot. And I just feel like there's most of us don't have practice facilities where you're hitting Pro V1s off of grass and at good targets with launch monitor, knowing how far it carries, that sort of stuff. I learned all that jazz out there playing golf 9 holes late in the evening, before dark. And yeah, okay, that was 86 yards away, and I hit the, kind of 3/4, 54 degree, and look at my pitch marks 5 yards past. I know I carried it 90. I mean, it's just right that I just feel like there's a lot to be learned on the golf course, and get out there, play a lot, and pay attention.
That's a lot of where Cooper and I learned it too. We practiced a lot. We played a good amount. We also, those late evenings, be able to grab a bunch of golf balls, go out on the course when it was empty, and mess around on the greens and try out new things and get to see how the ball reacts on high quality greens in situations. And I think that kind of development is important for players. It sounds like, you're passionate about players getting better. You want them to improve. And I think everybody does. And you're passionate in part about putting yourself out of job. You want them to be able to not necessarily need you, because you want them to get that much better to where they can help manage themselves. You want them to be never come back to you for a lesson, but to be able to help self-regulate, because you don't want them to be out there in a college tournament or out there at a tour event and be like, oh, I need my coach here right now. Tell us a little bit about your philosophy as far as getting them to be self-sustaining to a degree, and not always be like, I just hit a 30-yard draw. Oh, I hit 2 30-yard draws. Oh, I hit 5 30-yard draws in a row. I can't stop it. I need to call a coach, and he needs to tell me how to get less flexion in my left wrist to be able to get rid of that 30-yard draw.
Yeah, you described it, that you can't phone a friend there on the 5th tee after hitting 3 snap books, right? So it's like, whether it's a tournament player, I know that's kind of your guys' focus here, but it's for all players, like helping them to understand what they need to know, not more than, so I think we've got a lot of golfers that know a lot more than they need to know about the golf swing, right? The technical stuff and all the terminology and everything else. But I want them to understand cause and effect. They look up and they see the ball flying a certain way. They've kind of got their troubleshooting section where they, okay, well, is that all club face, or was that path? Did I come over the top, so to speak? Whatever. Well, a decent player should feel the difference between club face just absolutely flipping the heck, left, or, halfway left. Those are 2 entirely different things, and they should be able to feel the difference. So then, okay, what's the, my players, we're going to train them. Okay, what is your counter shot? So, it might be go out. Okay, you normally play right to left. Listen, you're going to go left to right, or feel like you're left to right to get through this round. And so we want them to, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? I just feel like, there's times you kind of hang on and scrape it around, and, the bad days of 71, not a 78. So yeah, I do want them to be self-reliant, but certainly there's times the process goes on. I think that, whether it's you're a fan of a Butch Harmon or a Chris Como, or 2 different approaches, but I think that, coaching, as coaches should be evolving. Like I may have come to the table with, certain skill set or understanding, and I want to expand that. So I'm constantly learning and growing. But I think the player, we need to say, okay, how much do they really need? Like, I mean, right? So people criticize guys like me, former players, that we start coaching. It's like, well, they don't really, and so, or their feels aren't real and whatever else. And I acknowledge that. That's why I've been studying this stuff for 20 years, but feel is all the player really has. It's like when it's time to go, right? You guys know that. That's like whatever. I mean, I go ahead and put a word combo out there, high draw. Like you guys probably both can feel that in your body, kind of the movement, whatever. And so players need to develop that. And nowadays, a lot of young people are growing up with launch monitors, and so everything is associated with numbers. But ultimately, 148, my 8-iron was that feel, kind of stuff like that. So, but anyway, so yeah, the training players to, it's a sport. It's about getting the ball from point A to point B, lowest number of strokes possible. And, when it's time to roll, I'm not a fan of super rigid pre-shot routines, and just watching some people putt is excruciating. And I just feel like, you have 50 bits of information per second you can process in your pre-foul. What are you going to put that attention on? How are you going to use that? And I just feel like people are, that's their computer RAM. They've used it up and on the wrong stuff. So anyway, game's getting way, way, way too complex. I'm all about science and embracing it, but I think that when you start figuring out all the different aspects, it becomes pretty simple. And you're either a good athlete or you're not. You can hit it solid or you can't. I mean, it's so some of those basic skills are, and then darn it, there's good luck and there's bad luck too. There's people that played their best golf outside of Q school, and it's like, well, good luck. Go try to shoot 61 on Mondays, but it's, a lot of traffic on the highway in competitive golf. But I prefer simple, lots of time playing the game on the golf course. And I'm not always there, but I definitely take my students out on the course frequently.
I think that's a really good point. And, obviously, while it's clear that technology has made players a lot better, there's definitely lots of people that are bogged down with too much information. How do you get people to, develop their feels and focus on keeping it simple?
Yeah, I think I alluded to it earlier. It's like, try something crazy. How low can you hit that 8-iron? How high can you start it right of flag X and curve it towards whatever, and just understanding, developing cause and effect. And there's, I don't know, I think that body track, the launch monitor, get all that stuff and use it when needed. But I just feel like, I'll tell you a little story. I worked with a D1 player, and our first session together, just like so many of those guys, right? Just beautiful looking, perfect swing, and flushing it each time, and hit this high draw 8-iron or whatever. So, okay, can you hit a different shape shot? Can you hit it kind of low and hold it, or feel like you're getting a low fade? Well, I can try it. Hit it perfect. I said, well, how far do you think that went? I had no idea. Right. So, I mean, there's just, in this day and age, these great golf swings. Like, you get on that golf course. I'm not saying you have to work it every different way, but all of a sudden you show up and the wind's blowing 25 miles per hour. What are you going to do? Do you have a low shot against the wind or ride the wind? And I just feel like there's a lot of folks learning in studios, and then, it's not a science project all the time. You've got to get out there, and you're going to go out in the wilderness, or give you a pocket knife, and there's bear and everything else. So, I'll see you in 2 days. Survive. You got to survive with, you got your golf clubs. You don't have track with you. You can't video your swing. So, but just, I'd say, different shots, hit different shots, and you may or may not use them, but I just feel like it heightens kind of a cause and effect, club face awareness. I'd say that club face is king. They're the best players in the world. The ball strikes the center of it, and they deliver it pointed in the right direction. So sometimes in training, everybody's thinking about the stuff behind the ball instead of in front of it. And there was years ago, David Fehr had a studio program and had guests in there, and he had 3 of the Harmon brothers in there. And they were all discussing golf swing and everything else. And at the end, as they were wrapping up, Fehr said, okay, so let's just settle it once for all. Who's the best coach? Kind of figuring they'd argue which one of the 3 of them. All 3 of them in unison set the golf ball. So, I just think that if people paid more attention to ball flight and understood what happened, okay, and don't have to turn to a coach, don't have to turn to a screen or, launch monitor, I think a lot of golfers would be better off. So that sounds very old school. I'm not young, but I've been learning more and more about technical things, and I feel more confident than ever about the statement I just that, how far do you follow the technology? Is everything that we can measure useful? And it certainly is to the coach, but to the player, I'm afraid that too many people know too much and are paying attention to too much tech.
I think, the most important thing you mentioned in there was when that student that you had didn't know how far he hit it. And that's definitely something that you can work on with technology. But if people took one thing from that, for me, it would just be know how far you hit it. And if you do that, then you're not going to get in too much trouble.
Right. Yeah. And Cooper, I agree. But there's like one club in the Seattle area that I'm aware of that has Pro V1s on the driving. So how are you going to work on distance control hitting a range rock? Right. They could set up TrackMan or Full Swing or whatever all day long, and that number is not legit. You go to people want to do TrackMan combines. That's a waste of time. It's like,
well, you got to go on the course.
Right. Exactly. So that's my point. And pay attention out there. You got your rangefinder, whatever you're using. And, but I just think that people, unfortunately, like our training grounds are just not set up, typically to learn that skill you're talking about, which is how far do you hit it? And so, finding the right way to do it. Normalization, they're getting better and better. The algorithms are getting better and better, but cut one of those range balls in half and you'll see the problem. But so anyway, back out on course. You don't need to do a lot. Like, if I get out there and, this is tour events and we travel around in different climates, different elevations. And I hit 2 iron shots and I've recalibrated my yardages. It's like, okay, that 8 iron carry. This is back on the day, right? We weren't getting 170 yard 8 irons, but within 2 holes, the first morning practice round, I kind of knew what my yardages were. So, and that's just from playing and paying attention and that sort of thing. But it's those are important skills. And where I teach, every afternoon, every single spot, every mat is full. People are hitting balls, right? And you go to the short game area and there might be 2 people, nobody on the putting green, and the first tee's wide open, so it's like, there's a cost, it's expensive to play at this particular facility, but the fact of the matter is too many people think they're going to find it, hitting off a mat, hit 200 balls off a mat. There's a time for that, but somebody wants to play good tournament golf, and that's what you guys are all about. Got to get out on that golf course as much as possible. And if that means you're out there till dark and that's the opportunity, show me you care, get out there and do it.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate you taking the time to join us, Rick. The last question we ask every guest is the same. And for you, it's going to be a 2-parter. So The last question is, if you could go back to yourself as a junior golfer and tell yourself just one thing, what would that one thing be? And in your case, since sometimes you work with juniors, if you could tell a junior golfer one thing, what would that one thing be?
So for me, going back to junior, I'd say if I could tell myself something, it's like, well, it would be something along the lines of don't change. It's already good enough. I mean, I played some of my best golf and in that phase. And then advice to a junior golfer today would be, obviously we talked about getting out on the course and playing a lot. It's like, I'd say something like, hey, there's others that are obviously better than you at this point, but if you just keep improving, just figure out, just get a little bit better, each month, be better next year than you are this year. And then kind of, you'll understand the process a little bit better. And it's easy to be impatient and panicked. I've got some students I work with who are now juniors in high school, and if they haven't achieved stuff quite yet, they're panicking, right? They got to get a coach's attention now, and so that's a tough scenario. But just, I'd say for a junior golfer, it's just keep getting better, a little bit better. It doesn't have to be each day. Sometimes we don't feel like we improved, but we are building something positive. So put in the work and kind of have the long-term vision.
Perfect. Well, if people are looking to find you on social media, or they potentially want to work with you, tell them where they can find you and reach out to you.
Yeah, the easiest thing, if they know how to spell my last name, which is Fehr, Fehr Golf. So fehrgolf.com is the website, and that's my handle on Instagram and Twitter. So yeah, I primarily teach in person here in the Seattle area at the golf club at Newcastle, but I do have some remote coaching options for folks who don't live nearby that want to connect.
Perfect. Be sure to give Rick a follow, and that if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please subscribe and leave a rating. If you're listening on YouTube, please like and subscribe. This helps us get our message out to more people. And if you're trying to find us on social media, you can find us on Instagram at The Tournament Code and on Twitter at Tournament Code. As always, we appreciate you taking the time to join us. Look forward to diving in deeper to what it takes to play elite tournament golf.